Hi, everyone. I am an analyst. I am a data person. My job is to look at user behavior data, primarily within Google Analytics, and think how can we use it in order to both quantify the past, to measure how our past campaigns and our initiatives are performing, which is a super powerful concept and something that we should not minimize at all. But more than that, to think how can we use data not just to measure the past, but to inform the future? How can we use data to help execute our digital strategy and think of refining our existing processes that we have in place, to think of new processes that we should be creating where data is playing a critical role throughout that process? My focus primarily is on the website. And for that, the platform that I primarily use is Google Analytics. And when we talk about using data and incorporating it into our process, at the core, that means that we need to have good data. If we are using data, that means it has to be good data. And when we talk about what good data looks like, what does that mean? We can broadly categorize that into 3 categories. The first one is the quality of the data. If we are using data, we have to make sure that it is accurate. If we're creating reports that we're sending to our bosses, if we're running analyses that we're making decisions based on that, we want to make sure that the data is accurate. When we're looking at our data, we don't want to ask, is this accurate? Do we trust the data? We want to say, what does this mean, and how do we use it? So the first area, we have to make sure that when we have data in place, that it is accurate. The second area, and if you've worked with me on an analytics project, you've heard me say these terms, we want to be aggressive, and we want to be greedy from a data collection point of view. A standard Google Analytics implementation is really powerful. We get a lot of really good data. Who is coming to the website? And how are they getting there, and how much traffic do we get, and which pages do they go to? That's all data that comes by default. But we all have custom websites. The back end is built uniquely for our site. We have custom content that we build. We add design decisions and functionality, and we have our own internal needs. And we cannot say that there's a cookie-cutter approach to measurement. We need to have a custom implementation in place. If we have video on the site, we want to be able to measure, are users engaging with that video? If we add a slideshow, I want to be able to measure, are people interacting with the slideshow? If we then add functionality to that slideshow, we want to make it easy to share to social. I want to be able to measure that. Those are inputs that are going to give me a rich data set where I'm going to then be able to use that information to make decisions. Lastly, and probably the area that's probably forgotten the most when we talk about analytics, is usability. Usually we talk about usability, we think about web experiences. We want to make sure that we have a great looking website that's highly usable for our users. But the same thing can apply when we think about data. None of us have an internal statistician or data scientist that's going to look at the data. It's kind of worthless to say we're going to collect a lot of really high quality data, and it's going to be a super rich data set, but conducting an analysis using the data is going to require tons of hours of really granular work in Excel or something like that. It's just not going to happen. Our audience for Google Analytics is primarily marketers, and we have to make sure that the data is structured in a way where we can automate the ongoing stuff and we make it easy to do ad hoc analysis in a custom way. Now, luckily, thanks to advancements as far as tag management solutions like Google Tag Manager, thanks to third-party integrations from ticketing platforms, most of them integrate nowadays with Google Analytics, having good data is something that is easier today than it has ever been before. And this is something that we talk to many organizations, big and small. Many of them still struggle with this. And the really good news is this is something that can change really quickly. In the past, this would be a really expensive project. It would take months to work on it, lots of resources involved as far as an analytics person and a developer, and lots of back and forth. We can completely accelerate that process. And the cost associated with an implementation, with getting that good data in place, is a lot less than what it used to be. So if you're not in a place right now where you don't have good data, this is something that you can change, and you can change pretty quickly. And I encourage you, come speak to me afterwards, email me. Today's session is not about implementations. It's not about tracking. It's more of using the data. But this is something where all of us can be in a place where we all have good data. Once we have that data in place, and we assume we all have really good data, now the question shifts from what kind of data should we collect to how do we use the data? And it would be great if I was here and I was able to tell you, when you go back to the office, do this exact analysis and make these exact changes to the website, and it's going to work. That is not the case. There is no cookie cutter. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. When we go with those kinds of approaches, we compromise on the quality. We need to have a custom approach based on our organization and our content and our audience and our needs. And over here, when we're talking at bootcamp, we're not talking about going back to the office and doing exactly X, Y, and Z. We're talking about process and approach and tactics and strategies that we should try out, but that we also need to see if they work for us. Not everything is going to work for all of us, and there's going to be different flavors, different approaches to these tactics that we need to try out. And inherently, that's what we do as digital marketers. We try different things out. We experiment. We don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what's going to work every single time. So we try different things out, and we say we're going to use feedback in the form of data to help us decide what works and what doesn't. What do we need to keep refining? What do we need to invest more in? What should we abandon because it doesn't work for us in our organization? This is what we do all the time when we think of inbound marketing initiatives. We optimize all the time our targeting methodology. We change call to actions. We change the frequency of how often we send out emails and how we segment our users and the timing of when we post things on social. We are constantly tweaking things as far as our inbound marketing initiatives to optimize them and to increase the return on investment. If we look at it from a visual representation, it would look something like this, where we would say inbound marketing, this is essentially what many of us, this is what our job looks like in a way. We are constantly making changes and refinements to our inbound marketing initiatives, trying to improve the ROI, where the size of the change is there, but it's not really that big. It fluctuates a little bit, but we're not talking about massive changes to our inbound marketing initiatives. We're talking about tweaks and refinements. When we think, though, of once people have arrived at the website, not about getting them to the site, but thinking about the user experience and the website itself, we can broadly say that the trend looks very different. It would look more like something like this, where it's pretty static and doesn't really change that much for a while until it comes time to say we need a big change. And we will make that massive change in the form of a website redesign. We will go through that process. And then once it's finished, we go back to that same model where the website does not really change that much. And of course, we are updating the website as far as using existing templates and adding content to there when we have like a new season and we add new content. But we're not really redesigning those templates. We're not changing the back end. We're kind of working with the same templates that we have in place. The website isn't really evolving over time. Now, right now, our y-axis over here is the size of the change. This could very easily also be something like the cost. If you've gone through a website redesign, you know that this is a massive investment, hundreds of thousands of dollars in most cases, where you are investing in that one big project, that one big redesign. It could also be something as far as energy. If you've gone through a redesign, you know what I'm talking about. This is going to be a new job that you're creating for yourself on top of your existing job. You have to go through selecting vendors, and you have to manage the vendors. And if you have multiple, you have to manage their interconnection. And you have to manage your internal stakeholders and migrate content and go through design decisions and reviews. This is a big process that we go through. The reason why we go through website redesigns is something like this in most cases, where we see how our websites perform over time, and we look at our conversion rate. And it looks something like this, where we have two variables in play. One is seasonality. There's usually some kind of seasonality aspect as far as behavior repeating. When we have on sale every year, it's around the same time, we see that behavior repeat. It could be something like Nutcracker, or when we have big end-of-year campaigns, we see some kind of usual seasonality in our data. But what we're seeing is a downward trend over time. This is what I'm calling over here our kind of like natural decay that goes on. Over time, our websites do not perform the way they used to. And that's because they were designed years ago, and user behavior is changing. Users are coming to the website from Facebook and from Google, and having used Amazon on their phones and Netflix and Uber, they are coming to the site expecting a great user experience. And user behavior and user needs shift over time, but our website is not evolving at nearly the same rate. So over time, we see that our websites are kind of decaying. They're not performing the way they used to. If we think of what the internet looked like 5 years ago, it is very different than what it looks like today. So we say, OK, it's not performing compared to what we want. We want to see something like this. We want to optimize our internal campaigns we want to optimize also our website. How is the website performing over time? We want to see an upward trend like this. So we say we need a redesign. The site is broken. It is not performing the way it used to. We have that decay. Let's go with a website redesign. Now, I can tell you from my personal experience, prior to joining Capacity, I spent 5 years working at digital design agencies where all we worked on was website redesigns. And many different types of clients, many types of organizations, many types of projects. And finding a big lift like this is what we hope for. It is not easy. And in most cases, this does not happen. It could, but it's not guaranteed by any means. Website redesigns are no guarantee that you're all of a sudden going to improve the website drastically. Even if it does, however, even if we're successful and we get the redesign to work the way we want, essentially what we're doing is we're restarting this cycle of decay. We're resetting the timer. And we can say, let's mark a reminder in our calendar for 5 years from now. We're going to need to go through this process again. Because we are not going to evolve the website over time, but user behavior and user needs are going to change. And our website is not going to meet those user needs over time. Now, this is the best case scenario when we go through a website redesign. What happens if it looks something like this? We spent all that time and money and energy investing in the redesign, and we get something like this. It doesn't really move the needle at all. What now? Even worse, something like this. This can happen, and it's really scary, and I really hope I don't have to report on this to any client, because I will be guilty by association. This is something that can be really terrible. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and a year and a half, 2 years working on a redesign, and all this time and energy, and sales are down, conversion rate is down, and this can happen. Maybe we didn't incorporate data into the redesign, and we didn't really prioritize user needs as much as we prioritized our internal point of view. Maybe we tried to be too diplomatic internally, and we designed for too many use cases instead of really focusing on the top 2 or 3 that are going to drive success. Maybe we didn't think about SEO. SEO is something we go through design reviews. We talk about prototypes when we talk about websites. Those are the exciting things. No one talks about SEO, and we see this happen all the time. A new site will launch, and oops, we broke organic search, which was a free channel that drove a lot of high-quality traffic and a lot of revenue associated with that. We can go with a content-rich experience where we say we want to have lots of imagery and video, and maybe the back end wasn't architected properly, and the site looks beautiful from a visual point of view, but load time is really high. And there is an inverse relationship between load time and conversion rate. As load time goes up, conversion rate will go down. You're kind of in trouble when this happens because you do not get that money back. You don't get that time back, but you are stuck now with the website that is underperforming. By no means am I trying to advocate that we should abandon website redesigns. They are still absolutely necessary, and there's a time and a place for redesigns. We need them sometimes when we need to re-platform, when we need to migrate to a different CMS. Maybe visually, our templates are just not working anymore. We need a complete overhaul. There's a time and a place for a redesign, but the point that I'm trying to make is that there's also something that we need to consider. Website redesigns are super expensive, and they are laborious. They're going to consume a lot of your time and energy for the next year and a half plus. Even when they're successful, we are basically starting the new cycle. They are not happening frequently enough, and that's a major concern as behavior will keep shifting over time. And lastly, we just talked about this. They are really risky. There is no guarantee that they are going to work. So let's go back to our more optimistic model over here, where we said it will work. The website redesign will have a big lift on conversion rate, and we're going to have, again, that natural decay cycle. What I'm talking about today is a different model, a different approach to thinking about our websites. Rather than having that infrequent but really big and really expensive and really time-consuming and risky investment in the website in the form of a redesign, we're going to talk about having iterative optimization, where we're going to make lots of small changes to the website. We're going to do this on a frequent basis. They're going to be quick to run, quick to build, and we're going to test lots of different things out. Each experiment that we're going to run is going to be focused on one specific area of the website. We're not going to say we're redesigning everything and we're focusing on everything, which kind of means we're focusing on nothing. We're going to focus on one specific area at a time. And hopefully what we're going to end up seeing is that over time, we're getting that upward trend that we were looking for. And we're doing this in a way where we are minimizing risk. And the cost is a fraction of what a redesign is going to be. And we can do this without being 100% absorbed with all of our time in the redesign. This is something that's more sustainable for us, where we have all these other responsibilities that we have to still manage on a daily basis. Now, what's really interesting is that when we do lots of these little optimizations over time, we're not going after massive improvements every single time. But the sum total of lots of little changes, in most cases, is going to add up to be more than that big lift that we were hoping for, and which we were never guaranteed. But a lot of small changes are going to add up to being more than one big change over time. Essentially, what I'm trying to get people to buy into is the need for us to extend that culture of experimentation so that it's not just happening on our inbound marketing initiatives, and then we say, let's supplement that with a website redesign when we need it. We need a new process internally where we are thinking about website optimization just as much as we're thinking about optimizing our inbound marketing initiatives. Now, my last slide about the theory before we get into the actual platforms and case studies. The reason why I'm saying we need to optimize the website as frequently, if not even more frequently, than our inbound marketing initiatives. If we have a simplified version over here of an optimization that we made to search, let's say search drives 30% of our traffic, and we find a way to improve the performance in search by 10%, which is absolutely something we should go after, and something we should celebrate when we find that 10% lift. Because search is only 30% of traffic, the net is going to be a 3% lift. We're optimizing 30% of our traffic by 10%. When we find the same kind of optimization, however, and we do it towards the website, because all inbound marketing initiatives are touching the website, we have a 10% lift on the website. That's 10% net. We're extending the win from our optimization on the website to the ROI of our campaigns. We are driving people to a better converting website. That's going to have an impact on our campaigns. So having a win on the website is going to extend to all inbound marketing channels, not just when we have one specific win that we do within one specific channel. Now, what does this actually look like within the platforms? If I can get this to work. Yes. I ran my first A/B test 11 years ago. And the technology back then was super clunky and super expensive and required a lot of developers to be involved, and we needed designers, and I was included because I was the analyst that needed to be involved. It was not designed for marketers. The technology has shifted drastically over the past few years, where now we are able to conduct experiments on the website without being developers, without being designers. And I started this session by saying, I am a data person. I am an analyst. I have never been a web developer. I have never been a content creator. I have never been a web designer. Yet I am able to use an A/B testing platform to make changes to the website. And I think that that's really what's critical, is we think of the website as a marketing channel, as a really big marketing channel, and we as marketers need to have control over that channel, and we need to be able to optimize it and test it over time. This example that we're going to be looking at, the examples of the platform are using Optimizely. Optimizely is probably the most popular A/B testing platform out there. We at Capacity are actually migrating away from using Optimizely. There are other platforms out there. Google announced earlier this month that they're going to have their own product, Google Optimize, so you can keep an eye out for that. We are migrating away from Optimizely, but the examples are using Optimizely. The functionality is going to be very similar in all the other platforms. So it's not about Optimizely today, it's about capabilities of these platforms and the applications of this kind of methodology. Anytime we talk about technology, I'm always asked, what's the level of investment, what's the level of effort as far as going live? Literally one line of code. You go into the platform, they give you this one line of code. We are done with code. All the changes now that we want to make to the website, the experiments that we want to conduct, are all going to happen through an online interface. Let me show you some examples of things that we can do. If this works. Cool. So these are GIFs. They're going to keep cycling over time. I want to optimize the bootcamp landing page. I enter the URL to the site, and I select the element that I want to optimize. Let's say over here, the button that says register. Maybe I don't like that call to action. I don't feel there's enough urgency over there. I click on it. I say edit the text, and I just type in there, sign up today. I am now ready to run an A/B test. I created my test version. And now I can say I want to randomly send 50% of my traffic to control, to my previous version, to version A, and I want to send 50% of my users to version B, to my test version. and let me measure in real time which one works better against each other. I am making these changes over here in seconds. I don't need a web developer. I don't need a designer. I just go into the interface, and I click on the element, and I edit it. Another example, and this is not meant to be an exhaustive list of all the things we can test, but more of showing some different aspects that we can test and change within Optimizely. Maybe I feel that the button is fine with the copy, but it's not really prominent enough, and I want to draw more eyeballs and more attention to that. I just can click on it, edit the background, edit the style, and make it red. Again, in seconds, I created a new version of the page where I'm making a little tweak, and now I can run this in real time, one against the other, see which one works better. Part of the branding for this year for Bootcamp includes this kind of seat thing over there on the left. Maybe I feel like it looks a little weird. I personally don't. My point of view is I think it looks kind of cool. But this is something that is a subjective point of view. And honestly, what I think doesn't really matter. What matters is what the user thinks. And the user is really the person that should be deciding which version is better. I can click on that if I want to test it, and this is my hypothesis. Maybe that chair doesn't belong there. It looks kind of weird. Edit element, whoops, I just click remove, and gone. I am ready to create an A/B test. My last example, I would imagine many people in this room have been through a situation similar to this, where we're trying to figure out that good old global nav, what belongs in there and what doesn't, and what's the right order. And this is something that, unfortunately, we still see happen a lot, where the global nav is reflective of our internal org charts, not really of what users want and users need. I can click on that global nav, and I can select, maybe I want to move schedule to be number 1. I click on it, and I just click rearrange, and I drag it over to the left. No code, no web developer, no designer, and I created my test version in seconds. These are some of the things that we can do as far as creating the new test version in the testing platform. Once we've done this, we now finish the rest of the experiment settings. First, we decide who gets to be included in this experiment. We define the segment. Maybe it's all users. Maybe it's just people on mobile devices or on desktop, or people that have never been to the website before. We can play around with that and define our segments. We choose where to run this test. Is it just on the home page, on all pages of the site, if that was the global nav change, only on one event detail page? Define that within the platform. The traffic split. We said we can do 50 and 50. If I want to be a little more conservative, I can say maybe do 75-25. Or I can say, instead of an A/B test, do an ABC test, where I have 2 test versions. And I'll say 33%, 33, and 33. I can play around with that all within the interface. Lastly, measurement. We can say when someone gets to a specific URL, measure that. That's my success. When someone clicks on the button, I do that all through the interface if I want to. I would say the best approach, though, would be when you have that good Google Analytics implementation, integrate it with Google Analytics. This is something that will be really powerful, where I know it's a little hard to see. We now have our dimension on the left, the Optimizely version. We see the original versus the experiment. And now I have a custom report that I can automate on a daily basis, where I can see how many sessions and how many users. And this was a mobile experiment. So how many users tapped to call, and how many purchased, and what was the revenue. I can get all of that data from my custom implementation and associate it now with my Optimizely. So hopefully this is starting to get people excited and thinking about all these things about our websites that we don't really like and that we can start testing and getting rid of. What's important is to keep a data-driven process throughout this entire approach. First thing, we want to focus on the areas that present the biggest opportunity. Not just saying pages that get a lot of traffic, pages that we don't like, but saying pages that get a lot of traffic and are underperforming, finding that kind of way of defining opportunity. We want to be able to use data also to formulate our hypothesis. How are users currently behaving on the site? What's the context when they get to the page? Is it their first page? Are they new to the website? We want to incorporate user behavior as far as understanding, here's what users are currently doing. Let's create a new version that meets that behavior. We are going to decide entirely based on data, based on our KPIs. It's not going to be a subjective point of view. Data is going to decide what wins and what loses. And lastly, we are going to prove causation. When we run an A/B test, it's a controlled experiment. When we see a lift in performance or we see a decrease, we know that our test caused that. That is very different than when we do a change and we do a pre versus post analysis and we say it's correlated. When we do an A/B test, we prove causation. What we end up having, in my opinion, is we have a win-win situation. Obviously, if our test version beats out control, that's a win. We lifted sales by 10%. We can prove it. We can now go live with that, and we're going to have a big lift on our conversion rate. We've proved that it's going to work. If our test version goes down and it underperforms compared to control, I'm still going to call that a win. First off, we are learning about user behavior. We're going to incorporate that learning and that finding into future initiatives. But beyond that, what's our alternative? Either inertia, where we don't make any change and we kind of let the site decay over time, or we're going to make that change without doing an A/B test, and it's a loser. And it's going to happen for all users because we're not doing it as part of an A/B test, and we're not going to really be able to measure that properly. And once we do, we're going to now have to tell our developers that thing that you built, roll back and invest more hours into something that really wasn't worth anything. By doing an A/B test, we can quickly test different hypotheses and different ideas and see what works and what doesn't. So let me show you what that looks like as far as some case studies that we've conducted. First one that we have over here is for P&B. P&B, I think, had a super forward-thinking approach with their website redesign. They said that the redesign was going to be focused more on the back end, on going to a responsive solution, and that the design of the site isn't going to change that much. We're going to optimize that over time incrementally using A/B testing. If you've gone through a redesign where you've moved to being responsive, you'll know that one of the bigger pieces of the project is figuring out the content hierarchy. We have the same page now, but we have 3 different versions of it, one for tablet, and one for mobile, and one for desktop. And where on the different versions of the page does the different content belong? What we saw with P&B is that when we looked at the mobile production detail page, and I'm intentionally scrolling on the left kind of slowly, but the buy tickets links got moved all the way to the bottom. And to me, I thought that was actually really interesting to think about that. I don't know if it was done intentionally or not, but the question is, should we let users consume the information about the production first, and then say, OK, now that you've had a chance to learn about the production and read all this content, buy tickets? Or do we want to say, let's make that front and center? Maybe they already know about the production. They've seen content on Facebook, and they've seen it via the email, and they come to the page, and they're ready to purchase. Just like I created that test version with the global nav, where I clicked and dragged, I did the same exact thing over here. I took that module, and I dragged it higher up on the page. No developer, no code. Let this run for a couple of weeks. 60% lift in people clicking on those links. I am not asking P&B to create new content. I'm not asking them to tear down this template and build it from scratch. I'm not asking for new functionality. I'm taking existing aspects of the page, and I'm just reorganizing it in a more user-friendly approach. Here's another set of examples. Blumenthal, our first A/B testing client that we worked with. Again, looking at the mobile event detail page. Eric talked about this before. Our event detail pages are the stars of our page. We see they get a lot of traffic. We know about this problem, and there were some really good questions before about mobile purchase path. And this was something that was happening with Blumenthal as well, where users on mobile, once they were clicking to buy tickets, they weren't really purchasing because the mobile purchase path is not really optimized yet. And I think this is a big problem for our industry and something that we need to figure out. We have that link over there, though, box office. It's kind of muted and not easy to see. And again, Eric talked about this. You literally have a phone in your hands. Let me give the user an option to call to buy. Maybe that can increase sales. And I can increase sales by having people skip that bad mobile purchase path. If it's not built well, select your own seat is super tough to do. We have to pinch and zoom and create forms and fill them out. And sometimes we still see forms that ask for like my middle name. And this is something that we don't need and something we can just skip that process. So we said, let's add that button. I just copied the button from on top. I replaced that link. And I said, change it. Instead of linking to purchase path, link it to the phone number. 60% lift in calls. This is not a typo. This is something where we took existing content and just made little tweaks to it. I built this experiment in an hour or so. And we are able to run this. We are not taking a big risk. I'm not investing a lot of time. I'm measuring it in real time. If this version would have tanked and sales would have gone down, I would have been measuring that in real time, and I would have said, stop the experiment. It doesn't work. Let's go back to the drawing board and try again. Here's the desktop version of the event detail page for Blumenthal. One of the things that we saw, again, this page gets a lot of traffic. It was underperforming compared to what we expected. When I think of an event detail page and I think of the content that users are coming for, one of the more important pieces of content is the performance schedule. And you can see over here that was hidden in this accordion by default. And let me see, I think I have that. Yes. So performance schedule was kind of hidden over there in the accordion. Beyond that, and I don't have an example, a screenshot of this, but the performance schedule had some buttons that you can click on, and we saw a lot of users doing that, and it was downloading to calendar. And I have the luxury of looking at data not just for Blumenthal, for many of our clients. And even though I am personally a digital calendar user, I download to my calendar, we rarely see users do that. So it was kind of weird to see a lot of people doing it. And to me, it's not like all of a sudden Blumenthal had a different audience that's more likely to use the calendar. It was confusion. Users were expecting one thing, and they were expecting to start purchasing for that specific event, and it was giving them a weird experience. So we created this version. We said, let's automatically expose that content. Let's make it front and center. Let's make those links, instead of download to the calendar, let's link directly to the purchase path. Now, I know it's really hard to see over here. This is performing in mid-November. So this test is currently running. I don't have results for this. To me, the results aren't as interesting, honestly. I obviously hope this wins, but it's more about the process and approach and capability of me being able to try out this new approach for the event detail page. And if it works, our recommendation to Blumenthal will be extend this to all event detail pages on a permanent basis. If it doesn't work, let's try again. Let's try and figure out a right approach. Our last set of examples is for Wolftrap. Wolftrap on their homepage has a slider, an auto-scrolling carousel. And this is something where a lot of secondary research tells us that these are actually bad for conversion rate. We include them a lot of times because we're kind of indecisive and we don't know what really belongs there. So we'll say, let's just put a carousel there, and we don't really have to make that difficult decision. I would say, especially on mobile, it's kind of a weird thing. Wolftrap, on top of everything else, had a weird UX thing where if you try to scroll down once you're in there, it was acting kind of weird. So we said, let's change that. And on the homepage now, it's going to just take the first tile. And we're going to make it a static image and let that run over time. This is something that, again, I'm not asking for new content. I'm taking what we currently have and adjusting it a little bit. This test is currently running. If you were to check your phone right now, and please do it after the session, but half of you will get the version with the carousel. Half of you will get the version with the static image. A little change like that. So far, this looks like this is going to be a winner. We'll see. It's still running. We don't have results that are final yet. But so far, a little change like that, 6% lift in people viewing a performance detail page, a 15% lift in users getting to a ticketing page. My last example over here. This is the desktop version for Wolftrap of the performance detail page. And Eric was talking about this a little bit before as far as the role of a performance detail page. And to me, when I think of performance detail pages, they need to be informational. Users are coming to the page, and they're seeking specific information about this performance. And I think Wolftrap does a good job over here of giving information that users would want. It has imagery about this concert. It's got a description. It's got the pricing. It's got the date. It's got a few videos. When we looked at the data, we saw this page was getting a lot of traffic. Most people were entering directly on this page. They were new to the site. They never navigate to the homepage. And honestly, I don't want them to navigate to the homepage. That would be a weird experience to enter here and to have to go to the homepage. But what's missing from this page is inspiration. We are not selling sneakers or books. We're selling culture and art and an experience. And what's better in life than going to an outdoor concert and being with friends and having a drink? And that's something that you don't get at all from the first version. So we said, let's try this version over here, where we took what we had before and we added that kind of banner at the bottom. This was the only example that we have where we created a little content, not talking about lots of content creation. Quick project to create that banner. And we said, let's add that imagery that's inspirational, letting people know that attending this concert at Wolftrap is different than attending it at some other venue. There is something special about being here, and this is Wolftrap's branding. Be part of the Wolftrap experience. And we're showing what it's like to be there. It's going to be amazing. I want to tap into the user's emotion. I want them to get excited. I want them to see this and be thinking, I have to go to this concert. We ran this test. We let it run for a few weeks. Unfortunately, the results were inconclusive. The data was pretty much identical. We did not move the needle at all. And that really sucked. I wanted to have a good story to tell you guys. But this is part of what goes on in A/B testing. We're not always right. And frankly speaking, we kind of expected the results not to be that big because it's very subtle what we added. We said that the primary purpose of the page needs to be informational. Secondary is inspirational. And we had to work within the existing confines of the template. It wasn't something that we could make drastic changes. It was below the fold. It was something that we knew at best was going to have a small lift, and unfortunately it didn't have that. But I think that that's still okay. We learned from this, and I don't think that our hypothesis was wrong in this example. I don't think that we were wrong to say we need to infuse informational content with inspirational content. Our execution of that hypothesis, what we tried, it didn't work. And this is a quote by Avinash. If you know Avinash, he's Google's guru on analytics. He's amazing. He has a great blog if you want to follow. But this is one of his quotes from several years ago. We are going to make mistakes when we do experimentation, and we have to be OK with that. Otherwise, we're not trying hard enough. We're not pushing hard enough. When we do it, we're going to do it quickly, repeatedly. We're going to have the mechanism for knowing when we're right and when we're wrong. If we're right, we'll push it live to everyone, and we're going to see the benefits of that change. If we're wrong, we won't roll it out. We won't use it, and we're going to go back to the drawing board and try again. So all of these examples that I showed, we created really powerful experiments. We did it with very little investment. Quick to build, no content that we had to create aside from that one little banner. We did not ask to rebuild and tear down from scratch the templates. We did not try to change the content. We did not change functionality. We took what was there, and we just tweaked it a little bit to be more user-focused. If you want to start A/B testing, 3 requirements that you need to have. Number 1, A/B testing is a data-driven process. You must have good data. This is not optional. It's a data-driven process. Before you start A/B testing, make sure that you have good data in place. Number 2, when we go into A/B testing and we start thinking about our hypotheses, we have to have a user-centric approach. We are designing with one primary stakeholder in mind, and that is the user. When I think about what a great user experience is, it's that intersection between our organizational needs and the user's needs. We have to think about the user and prioritize the user as we're designing for them. Lastly, we're going to be wrong, and that we have to be OK with that. Sometimes we think it's such a slam dunk and a no-brainer, and we're going to be right, and there's no even point of testing it. And we'll try something, and we'll be wrong. That's OK. We have the mechanism for understanding that. We have the ability to see when we're right, when we're wrong. And we can, at worst, learn from it. At best, we're going to have wins that are going to improve our conversion rate. So quickly, just to recap, I want to leave some time for some questions. So I'm just going to run through these quickly. 5 takeaways. Number 1, again, foundation of A/B testing is having good data. Luckily, having good data is easier today than ever before. Please reach out to us if you have problems, if you have questions. This is something that can be addressed and changed really quickly, and you can drastically change the landscape of your data. Number 2, I can't see on the screen. Yes, redesigns are super exciting, but they're also super risky. And even when they work, they are not happening frequently enough. We cannot afford to let the website change only every 5 to 7 years or so. We have to think of how we can optimize the website on a more regular basis. Number 3, yes, when we optimize the website, we have to keep in mind we are extending the benefits not just to the website, but to all inbound marketing initiatives. That it's really going to help us win both from our website point of view, but also the ROI of our campaigns that are driving traffic to the site. 4, again, I talked about this. If we lose, it's still a win because we are learning. I'm not going to say anything more. And number 5, probably our most central ethos about digital. Great user experiences are what's going to drive digital success. We have to prioritize the user. But luckily, we now have an ability to make user-centric changes in a very quick and rapid way and see that little changes can still have a very big impact on our bottom line. Thank you very much.